Welcome to KO Stories, where I tell stories of the mysterious, twisted, and paranormal. And today is no different. I got a really good story for you guys, so without any further ado, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own.
Where I tell stories about true crime, missing people, and the paranormal. As of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own.
So on February 24th, 1986, Sherry Rasmussen was debating whether or not she was going to go to work. She had an unexciting class on her schedule, and so she decided to call out sick using a recent back injury as an excuse. Now, John, who was her husband, left for work soon after. Okay, so now it's a few hours later, and John calls the house. Now, when his call goes unanswered, he tried Sherry's work, assuming she, decided to go in. But he couldn't reach her there either. So he called the house a few more times, but to no avail. Now, John, of course, he's in his head at this point, and he's trying to ignore his worries and, just continue on with his day. But when he got home from work, he found a nightmarish scene. He found the answering machine unactivated, even though they activated it every day. He found a bloody handprint next to the panic button near the alarm, and the room was covered in nothing but broken objects. John Rutan, which was his full name, then found Sherry Rasmussen dead in the living room. She had been shot 3 times. And now, an LAPD forensic specialist also found a bite mark on her arm, and he took a swab of it. Now, the LAPD quickly ruled Sherry Rasmussen was a victim of a burglary. Though neighbors heard screaming and fighting, they did not call the police. Police surmised that the burglar was in the process of carrying, all the electronics out when Rasmussen came upon them, and then the fight ensued. And then the police recovered Rasmussen's missing car, and the only other stolen item was the couple's marriage license. Now, John was ruled out as a suspect, and then he moved from Los Angeles after the murder. And Sherry's father mentioned his daughter's issues with a woman named Stephanie Lazarus to the police. And, a little note was made. But the lead was never really followed up on. And this is probably because Stephanie Lazarus was also a police officer. And though the bite mark proved to be unusual, the case went cold as no suspect was ever identified. And the case just continued to be cold for 23 years. I mean, is there any hope in solving this? Well, this time, yes. Yes, there is. You see, at the time, the LAPD was too overwhelmed with the growing crack epidemic and related gang violence to dedicate the time that it needed for the investigation. But Sherry's father never believed that his daughter would not have been able to defend herself against some random burglar. And Sherry's father also tried for several years to have this case reopened. And later, detectives refused to do it, and it was not until DNA testing became available that the case gained a little bit of new traction. Now, a dedicated team at the LAPD worked out old forensic cases using new technology, and Sherry Rasmussen's case was now eligible. So, in 2004, criminalist Jennifer Francis found missing evidence from the file and the cotton swab with the DNA on it. Now, the saliva bite mark were deemed to be female, proving the initial theory of a male burglar was not possible. But for some reason, no detective wanted to take this case. For some reason, so it just remained cold again. Then, fast forwarding to 2009, the LAPD finally reopened the case, and it was ruled a murder with the burglary staged to throw police off the trail. Now, detectives were looking back at the case, and they eventually found Stephanie Lazarus' name in the notes from the original investigation, and they decided finally to pursue this lead. Now, they collected DNA from a coffee cup of Lazarus's that she threw away while off duty, and they were able to match it to the sample taken from the bite mark. Pretty cool stuff. Now, this evidence would prove that Stephanie Lazarus was Sherry Rasmussen's killer, and she was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 27 years to life at the California Institution for Women. Now, she has attempted to appeal her case several times, but the lower courts have upheld the conviction every time. Furthermore, the initial investigation of Rasmussen's death is now believed to have been purposely botched by the LAPD to protect Lazarus, one of their own. So, let's look at it this way. Sherry Rasmussen was found shot to death inside her home on February 24th, 1986 in an apparent burglary gone wrong. But the real killer was Stephanie Lazarus. And while you may be asking yourself is, why? Now, this is the twisted story behind the murder of Sherry Rasmussen. You see, Stephanie Lazarus wasn't somebody that just came in out of the blue. She was somebody that actually had an in-depth relationship with John. Yes, John Rutten and Stephanie Lazarus were both students at the University of California, Los Angeles, when they met and were both set to graduate in 1982. Now, John was a mechanical engineering major, and Lazarus was studying political science. They were also both active and very athletic. So John and Stephanie Lazarus began a casual relationship, but were not intimate with each other until after graduation. Now, John took a job as a hardware developer, and Lazarus became a police officer at the LAPD. Now, though they hooked up a number of times, they never made their relationship official. It was never concrete. And later, John met Sherry Rasmussen, who was quickly rising within the medical field. And she was already the director of nursing at Glendale Adventist Medical Center. So Sherry and John bonded quickly, and soon they even moved into their own apartment together in Van Nuys. And Stephanie Lazarus, meanwhile, had a hard time just letting go of John and made herself something of a third wheel in their relationship, a situation that really made Sherry often uncomfortable. Now, at the 25th birthday party that Lazarus threw for John, he told her about Sherry, confessing that they were seriously involved. And let's just say Lazarus, she wasn't really happy, and she actually wrote a letter to John's mother in 1985. And the letter said this:
I'm truly in love with John, and the past year has really torn me up. I wish it didn't have to end the way it did, and I don't think I'll ever understand his decision.
John later testified that before he and Rasmussen got married, he and Lazarus had sex one final time so, Lazarus could have some closure on the relationship. But instead, Stephanie Lazarus began hanging around more and more, and her constant contact with John worried Sherry. But John, assured her, babe, everything's going to be okay. It's nothing more than a friendship between us right now. However, Lazarus, her infatuation just grew stronger and stronger. And at one point, she even came to Sherry's office to tell her, if I can't have John, no one else will. And I mean, who are you really going to tell at this point? You can tell family and stuff, but are you going to call the police and say, hey, a police officer just basically told me in a, passive-aggressive way that she's going to kill me? I mean, Sherry definitely was put in a very tough spot. I could only imagine how uncomfortable that made her feel hearing that, and just the clock ticking in her head what to do about, should I tell somebody? What should I do? Should I call the police? Or if I do call the police, maybe it's one of her friends and maybe they won't take me seriously, or maybe they'll tell Lazarus and that'll piss her off more and then she'll come after me sooner. Just imagine the thoughts that could have been rushing through her head. And even though Sherry was worried that Lazarus was stalking her, Sherry leaned into John's assurances, and the pair got married in November of 1985. And they had 3 months of marital bliss before tragedy struck. And the rest, you already know.